Hello everyone, and welcome back to Talk Helen. I'm Helen, and I'm really glad you're here today. Now, before we start today's conversation, let me welcome our guest. Joining me today is Michael. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Helen. It's great to be here, and I have a feeling today's topic is going to expose me a little bit.
I think it's going to expose a lot of people. Because today we're talking about something almost every English learner says. Something you've probably said hundreds of times, maybe even thousands. And honestly, something that might be making your English sound less natural than you realize. Today's topic is, stop saying, "I don't know, say this instead."
Yeah, that's definitely me. Whenever somebody asks me a question and I'm not sure about the answer, I immediately say, "I don't know."
Exactly. And let's be clear right from the beginning. There is absolutely nothing wrong with saying, "I don't know." It's correct. Native speakers use it. You'll hear it everywhere. The problem isn't the phrase itself. The problem is when it becomes your only option. Because real conversations are full of uncertainty. And native speakers express uncertainty in many different ways. They don't always use the exact same sentence.
That's true. Now that I think about it, I hear people saying lots of different things.
Exactly. And today, we're going to explore those alternatives. Not because we're trying to sound fancy, not because we're trying to impress people, but because we want our English to sound more natural, more flexible, more human. Let me ask you something. Imagine I ask, "Do you think it'll rain tomorrow?" What would you normally say?
Probably. I don't know. Second.
Okay, now imagine I ask, "What time does Sarah arrive?"
Again. I don't know.
And then I ask, "Which restaurant should we go to tonight?"
Honestly. Still. I don't know.
See? That's exactly what happens to many learners. Different situations, different questions, different contexts, but the same answer every time. And after a while, it starts sounding repetitive. Not wrong, just repetitive. And natural conversations usually aren't repetitive. Natural conversations have variety, emotion, personality. Let's start with one of the easiest alternatives. "I'm not sure." This might be the most useful phrase in today's entire episode. Imagine somebody asks, "What time is the meeting?" Instead of saying, "I don't know," you can say, "I'm not sure." Immediately, it sounds softer, more conversational, more natural.
Yeah, that actually sounds better.
And here's the interesting thing. Many native speakers probably use "I'm not sure" more often than "I don't know," because it feels less direct, a little more relaxed. Now let's try something. I'll ask questions. You answer naturally. Ready?
Ready.
What time is the movie?
I'm not sure.
Where's David?
I'm not sure.
Great. Already sounds natural. Now let's go one step further. Imagine somebody asks, "Do you think she'll get the job?" Would you say, "I don't know"? Maybe. But native speakers often say, maybe. That's it. One word. Simple, natural, and very common.
I use maybe sometimes, but probably not enough.
Most learners don't, because many learners believe longer answers sound better. But often native speakers do the opposite. They simplify, they shorten, they relax. Imagine. "Do you think they're coming?" Maybe. Done. Conversation continues. no stress, no complicated grammar, no overthinking. Now let's talk about another great phrase. I have no idea.
I hear that one all the time.
Because it's incredibly common. And notice something. It doesn't feel exactly the same as, I don't know. It's stronger. It's more expressive. Imagine somebody asks, "Where are my keys?" And you reply, "I have no idea." You're basically saying, "I genuinely don't know. I haven't got the slightest clue."
It feels more emotional.
Exactly. And that's what makes conversations interesting. Emotion, personality, expression. Now imagine you're talking with a friend. Friend, why did Jason quit his job? You, I have no idea. Perfectly natural. Now let's look at another phrase, one of my personal favorites. It depends.
That's a good one.
It's incredibly useful because many questions don't have one answer. Imagine somebody asks, "What's the best city to live in?" Can you really answer that with certainty? Probably not. So instead of saying, "I don't know," you can say, "It depends." Now the conversation becomes more interesting because people naturally ask, "Depends on what?" And suddenly you're discussing ideas, not just giving answers.
That definitely keeps the conversation alive.
Exactly. And that's something many learners don't realize. The goal isn't simply answering questions. The goal is creating conversation. Now imagine somebody asks, "What's the best way to learn English?" You could say, "It depends," because honestly, it does. Different people learn differently. Different situations require different approaches. Different goals require different methods. And that's why "it depends" is such a powerful phrase. Now let's talk about another common situation. Sometimes people ask for your opinion, and learners panic because they think they need a perfect answer. Imagine someone asks, "Do you think that movie is worth watching?" Many learners say, "I don't know." But native speakers often say, "I think so," or "I don't think so," or "probably," or "maybe," or "I guess."
I hear "I guess" constantly.
Because it's everywhere. Let's talk about that one. I guess. Such a small phrase, but native speakers love it. Imagine somebody asks, "Do you think he'll call back?" You might say, "I guess," or "I guess so." That means yes, probably. But you're not completely certain. You're expressing uncertainty in a natural way. And that's something fluent speakers do constantly. They don't always speak with 100% certainty. They soften their opinions. They leave room for possibility. They sound flexible. Now here's something interesting. A lot of learners believe fluency means always having answers. But real fluency often means expressing uncertainty comfortably. Think about that. Real life is full of uncertainty. Nobody knows everything. Nobody has perfect answers. And because of that, natural English contains countless ways to say, "I'm not completely sure." That's why today's topic is so important. We're not just learning vocabulary. We're learning how real people think. Now let me ask you something, Michael. Why do you think learners overuse "I don't know"?
Because it's safe.
Exactly. It's familiar, comfortable, reliable. You learn it early, you memorize it, and then it becomes automatic. Somebody asks a question. Your brain immediately says, "I don't know." without even thinking. And that's what we want to change. Not because the phrase is wrong, but because you deserve more options. Imagine your English as a toolbox. If your toolbox only contains one tool, you're limited. But if your toolbox contains 10 tools, you become flexible. And flexibility is one of the biggest signs of fluency. Let's imagine 3 different situations. Situation 1, your friend asks, "Will the team win tonight?" You say, "Maybe." Situation 2, your coworker asks, "What time does the meeting start?" You say, "I'm not sure." Situation 3, your brother asks, "Where's my phone charger?" You say, "I have no idea." 3 situations, 3 answers. All natural, all common, all useful. And suddenly your English sounds more authentic, more alive, more real. Because that's what real conversations sound like. They aren't built from one repeated sentence. They're built from options, choices, variations. And that's exactly what we're learning today. The next time somebody asks you a question, I don't want you to automatically respond. I want you to pause for 1 second. Just 1 second. Then ask yourself, could I say, "I'm not sure"? Could I say, "Maybe"? Could I say, "It depends"? Could I say, "I guess"? Could I say, "Probably"? That tiny pause can completely change how natural your English sounds. And honestly, that's where fluency begins. Not in giant grammar books, not in complicated vocabulary lists, but in small, everyday moments. Moments that happen every single day. Moments just like this. Because the truth is, sometimes the biggest improvements come from the smallest changes. And we're only getting started, because there are even more natural alternatives that native speakers use every day. Some of them are funny, some of them are playful, some of them instantly make conversations feel more relaxed. And once you start using them, people will notice a difference in your English almost immediately.
Now I'm curious, because I already feel like I've learned several expressions I'd actually use.
And that's exactly what I want. Not expressions that stay in your notebook, expressions that become part of your real conversations, expressions that make speaking feel easier. And that's what we're going to continue exploring. Now here's something interesting. There are moments when saying, "I don't know," can actually make you sound less confident than you really are. Not because you lack confidence, but because the phrase can sometimes stop a conversation completely. Imagine this. Someone asks, "What do you think about that idea?" And you immediately say, "I don't know. Conversation finished. Nothing else happens." But what if you answered differently? What if you said, "I'm not really sure yet. Now the conversation feels open." Or maybe, "I haven't thought about it much." That's another great one.
Oh, I like that. Because sometimes you genuinely haven't thought about something.
Exactly. And that's the key. Natural English isn't about memorizing replacements. It's about expressing your actual situation. Imagine someone asks, "Which country would you most like to visit?" Maybe you've never really thought about it. Instead of saying, "I don't know," you could say, "I haven't really thought about that." Immediately you sound more engaged, more conversational, more human, And notice something important. You're not giving an answer, but you're still participating in the conversation. That's a huge difference, because communication isn't always about knowing. Sometimes it's about sharing your thinking process. Native speakers do this constantly. For example, "That's a good question,"
I hear that one a lot too.
because it's incredibly useful. Imagine somebody asks, "What's the secret to being successful?" You might not have an immediate answer. Instead of saying, "I don't know," you can say, "That's a good question." Now you've bought yourself a little thinking time. And it sounds natural, professional, thoughtful.
It's almost like you're keeping the conversation moving while you're thinking.
Exactly. And that's a skill, a very valuable skill. Now, let's build on that. Imagine someone asks, "Why do people enjoy traveling so much?" You could say, "That's a good question." Then continue. "I think it's because people enjoy new experiences." Notice what happened. You didn't immediately know the answer, but you gave yourself time to think. And that's something fluent speakers do all the time. They don't panic when they don't know. They stay calm. They stay engaged. And they keep talking. Now here's another expression I absolutely love. "I'm not really sure." It's similar to "I'm not sure," but slightly softer. Imagine somebody asks, "Do you think they'll change the policy?" You could say, "I'm not really sure." Very natural, very common, very conversational, and again, it sounds different from "I don't know." That's the whole goal today, building flexibility. Let's talk about another phrase. "I couldn't tell you."
I've heard that before.
And native speakers use it quite often. Imagine somebody asks, "When exactly will he arrive?" You say, "I couldn't tell you." It simply means, "I don't know," but it sounds more conversational, more relaxed, more native.
So it's not necessarily about learning difficult English. It's about learning different English.
Exactly. That's probably one of the biggest myths in language learning. Many people think fluent speakers know bigger words, but often fluent speakers simply know more ways to express the same idea. That's why today's lesson is so powerful. We're taking one sentence and turning it into 10 different possibilities. Now let's imagine a social situation. You're at a party. Someone asks, "How do you know the host?" Instead of saying, "I don't know," which wouldn't make sense anyway. You might say, "Actually, I'm not sure," or "Good question," or "I've never really asked." These responses feel natural because they're specific. That's another important lesson. Specific responses usually sound better than generic responses. For example, question: "Why is the store closed?" Generic response: "I don't know." Specific response: "I'm not sure. Maybe they're renovating." Now notice what happened. You don't actually know, but you're contributing something. You're participating. And that's how real conversations work.
I think that's why native speakers sound so smooth. They're always adding something.
Exactly. They're not trying to give perfect answers. They're trying to keep communication flowing. And that's a very different mindset. Let's talk about another common phrase, "beats me."
I've definitely heard that one in movies.
And in real life. Quite often, imagine somebody asks, "Why didn't they call us back?" You shrug and say, "Beats me. It's casual. friendly, and it means I have absolutely no idea.
That sounds fun.
It is. And that's another thing learners sometimes forget. English conversations aren't supposed to sound like exams. They're supposed to sound like people talking. People joke. People use expressions. People play with language. That's part of sounding natural. Now, imagine somebody asks, why is the internet so slow today? You could say, beats me, very natural, very native. Now let's talk about another expression. No clue.
That's another one I hear all the time.
Because it's short and useful. Question, where's Mark? Answer, no clue. Simple, fast, natural. And notice how different it feels from, I don't know. It's more casual, more conversational. Now, let's step back for a moment. Look at all the alternatives we've discussed so far. I'm not sure. Maybe, probably, I guess. It depends. I have no idea. That's a good question. I haven't really thought about it. I couldn't tell you. Beats me. No clue. That's already a huge collection of useful expressions. And here's the amazing thing. None of them are difficult. Not one. These are everyday phrases. The kind of phrases native speakers use constantly, which means you can start using them immediately. Now let me ask you something, Michael. If you had to choose just 3 from today's episode, which ones would you start using tomorrow?
Definitely. I'm not sure. I guess. And that's a good question.
Excellent choices. Because those 3 work in so many situations, and honestly, if every listener only learned those 3 phrases today, their English would already sound more natural. Now here's something I want everyone listening to understand. The goal isn't to eliminate I don't know. You don't need to ban it from your vocabulary. Native speakers still use it. I use it. Michael uses it. Everyone uses it. The goal is balance. The goal is having options. Imagine eating the same meal every day. Even if it's a good meal, eventually you want variety. Language works the same way. Variety creates richness. Variety creates personality. Variety creates fluency. And that's why these small changes matter. They're small individually, but together they completely transform how your English sounds. Now let's imagine a final situation. You're sitting with friends. Somebody asks, what do you think the world will look like in 50 years? You don't really know. Nobody does. But instead of saying, I don't know, you smile and say, that's a good question. Or, I haven't really thought about that. Or, I guess technology will change a lot. Suddenly, you're part of the conversation. You're contributing. You're engaging. And that's what communication is all about. Not having perfect answers. Not knowing everything, but participating, sharing, connecting. Because the truth is, the best conversations aren't built by people who know everything. They're built by people who are comfortable exploring ideas together. And the moment you stop relying on one automatic phrase, your English becomes more flexible, more expressive, and much more natural.
Honestly, I think after today, I'm going to notice every time I say, I don't know.
That's exactly what I hope happens. Because awareness is where improvement starts. Once you notice a habit, you can change it. And once you change it, your English starts evolving naturally, One conversation at a time. One phrase at a time. One small improvement at a time. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Helen. This was one of those topics that seemed small at first, but ended up changing how I think about everyday English.
Those are often the most powerful lessons. And thank you to everyone listening. The next time you're about to say, I don't know, pause for a second. Remember today's conversation. Choose a different expression. Experiment. Have fun with it. Because fluency isn't about memorizing thousands of words. It's about using the words you already know in smarter ways. And that's exactly what we're doing here on Talk Helen. I'll see you in the next episode. Take care, everyone.